Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Backchecking the Bolts is your cup of coffee to get you the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Join host Jason Linkus and the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, as they break down the Lightning's most recent games and go beyond the highlights, telling you what the box scores didn't. It's time to drop the puck.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's February the 15th. The U.S. just defeated Germany by a score of 5-1. And right now you're listening to Backchecking the Bolts, where we go beyond the box scores to give you the latest and greatest on your Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm your host, Jason Linkus, and as always, I'm joined by the managing editor of Raw Charge. You can see him on www.rawcharge.com. He's the one and only. He's Justin Godfrey. Justin, what's going on, bud?
Hey, not much. How you doing today, Mr. Linkus?
Not too bad. Got a chance to enjoy a little bit of Olympic hockey, and again, as I mentioned before, we're finally getting some of the snow melt. So I'm a pretty happy camper. But I tell you who else is a pretty happy camper: the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. When you take a look at how some of their players have played in the Olympics, they've had some really good performances.
They have. I think a couple of them may have been unexpected. I know Zemgus Girgensons had a pretty good opening round for Latvia. I haven't really seen too much production from Hagel, Team Canada, but Jake Gensel, he doesn't have a lot of points yet, but like even in today's game, he was all over the ice. He had 2 or 3 golden opportunities that got robbed, but I thought he played pretty well. The surprise out of it probably is JJ Moser and what he's done with the Team Switzerland. So he's kind of continued his strong play to start the season with the Lightning, and he's racking up the points with Switzerland, who could maybe pull up a little bit of an upset here moving forward.
You had mentioned Moser and Girgensons, 2 players that I want to say they've outperformed probably the expectations that the media's had. Is this a case of in Tampa they have a third defenseman role? Girgensons is on the back half of the forward lines. Do you think it's just that they're in a situation in Tampa where they're just not seeing 20 minutes a game and they're playing their 10 to 15 a game, and all of a sudden when they get better opportunities, you see better production?
I would say that's definitely the case with Girgensons. He is a fourth line center for the Lightning. Well, third line winger. He came to the team as a fourth line center, but he's been put on that Yanni Gord and Pontus Holmberg line, the kind of the third line for the Lightnings. Yeah, he's a guy who, he gets 10, 15 minutes a game with the Lightning. He's not expected to score. He goes over, plays for Latvia. He's one of their top centers. He's going to get a lot more ice time, a lot more opportunities. He's kind of made the most of it. One of these things with tournaments like this is I do think some players can build off of it. So with Girgensons, played a lot of hockey, so he kind of gets his reps in. Maybe that carries over to when he comes back to North America. As far as Moser, honestly, he's doing exactly what Lightning fans have seen him do all year. He is their top defenseman this year. He's played more minutes than anybody else on the blue line, and he's starting to put up the points. He's not a huge point accumulator like Darren Radish. He's probably getting a little more press because he does have the big booming shot. Moser's one of these guys who just does everything the right way. He's in position. He makes the smart play, and he's kind of showing it with Switzerland. He's shown, like I said, he's showing the rest of the world what he's been doing with the Lightning all year. He is a top defenseman. He is the reason, one of the big key parts of that Mikhail Sergachev trade. So he's kind of blossoming into his own right now, and he's just doing all the things that Lightning fans have come to expect from him.
Well, Justin, let's take a look at the Olympic standings. In Group A, Canada, perfect 3-0. They have 9 points. The Swiss are in second with 5. Czechia in third with 4. France went winless. They have no points. In Group B, Slovakia surprisingly took the group with 6 points. They got it on a variety of tiebreakers over Finland and Sweden, who also finished with 6 points. Italy went 0-3. They have no points. In Group C, the United States with a perfect 3-0. They have 9 points. And Germany, Denmark, and Latvia all tied for second with 3 points. Now, we just got the matchups in. The Czechia-Denmark winner will face Team Canada. The United States is the second seed. They face a tough matchup in possibly seeing Sweden or Latvia in their quarterfinal match. Slovakia, the 3 seed, will face the winner of Germany and France, and the Finns will take the winner of Switzerland and Italy. Justin, we're just seeing this right now, but it looks to me like Canada has a walkover into the semifinals, but the United States could face Team Sweden in the quarterfinals. That's a tough matchup.
Yeah, I think that Group B is the one that threw everything out of whack a little bit. Prior to the tournament, you were thinking Sweden was going to probably win it fairly easily. Maybe you get a little challenge from Finland. Slovakia came out with that first game upset and kind of coasted in to take the top seed. One thing I will say about Sweden, they're getting better as the tournament goes on. I don't think they've quite found their groove yet, but that their last win was probably their best win. So they could be a tough matchup, like you said. I do think they're going to win their next match against Slovakia and move on and to face the U.S. So that's going to be one of those early knockout stage games that probably you didn't want to see. You didn't want to see them knocked out this early, either the U.S. or Sweden, but it is going to be a challenge. And the U.S. is going to have a little extra rest. Is that good for them? Is that bad for them? It's hard to say in these kind of short tournaments. That's going to probably be the most intriguing quarterfinal game, I think, that we have coming up on the schedule in a couple of days.
When I take a look at the matchups, Finland, the 4 seed, they have a pretty easy quarterfinal match when they play either the Swiss or Italy. And it's most likely going to be the Swiss. But for Finland, starting the tournament with that loss to Slovakia, they have played better as the tournament's gone along. But this is a great matchup for them. I don't see any reason why they're not in the semifinals.
Yeah, I think Finland, it's going to be really interesting to see if they can punch their ticket to maybe one of the final 4 teams. Pretty much Canada is going to be there. We know that. The winner out of the U.S. Sweden, then Finland can sneak in there, and then Germany is going to be one of these interesting teams. Germany has a ton of NHL talent on their roster. If they can get the goaltending they need, they could be upsetting there, be pulling off an upset and making it in. The quarterfinals are going to be fun. That's all I can say. I think this is really where the tournament starts. This is where the real kind of looking into it, and all these games now matter because it's you lose, you're done. There's no losers brackets or anything like that. It's you got to win in order if you're going to want a medal from here on out.
Yeah, the great part about this, it's just like the NHL playoffs. You win or you go home. Yep. But unlike the NHL playoffs where everything's a best of 7, it's one game and done. So you have that ultimate anxiety, just like the NCAA tournament. Every single time you take the ice, it could be your last in the Olympics. One of the interesting things about the Olympics, you get some oddities out there, and one of them happened in the Sweden-Slovakia game, Justin, where Sweden was leading, and in order to try to win their group and get the goal differential, they pulled their goalie. What was the thought behind that?
Just like you said, they needed to pick up one of the tiebreakers here, which is goal differential. So they're looking to score a couple extra goals. They could have pulled that off. They jump ahead of Slovakia and move into that first spot. It did not pay off for them. Slovakia ends up scoring a power play goal late to win the goal differential tiebreaker and push them ahead to get that top seed. International tournaments, sometimes there's some interesting rules that leads to those weird kind of situations. Good on them. That's kind of the fun part of some of these tournaments that don't play 100% by NHL rules or NHL thought processes. So, outside of, you having these guys that you've never heard of before, scoring goals and kind of willing their teams on, you do have these little odd situations. So, yeah, it's kind of the fun of Olympic hockey.
Well, let's go from the Olympics. Let's talk about the Bolts real quick. On our social media, you can reach out to us anytime with any questions, and we might use those questions on the air. John Prine on Blue Sky reached out to Justin and wanted to know what his general assessment of Jack Finley heading to St. Louis, because the Blues claimed him on waivers. Was he the odd man out? And because they tried him as a face-off specialist, did that fail?
Fail is kind of a tough word. I mean, there's not exactly anybody on the Lightning that's dominating the faceoff dot right now. I do think that they had a role for Jack Finley, and with the way some of the other forwards are playing, there just wasn't going to be a lot of ice time for him moving down the stretch now that everybody's kind of healthy. Once Braden Point's back, once Cirelli's back, there's just not going to be a lot of ice time for some of those guys that have been playing for that fourth line role. One of the reasons I think they tried to put Finley through waivers as opposed to, say, Curtis Douglas, who's going to be, again, getting a lot of time in the press box as opposed to on the ice, is that Finley had a 3-year deal. A lot of times teams may be hesitant to pick up that big of a contract. Julien Brisebois thinks, hey, I'll slide him through now that everybody's focused on the Olympics. Maybe he'll get through. A team won't want to commit to that. St. Louis is taking a chance, really, by claiming Finley right now. They do have some injuries right now. And when their healthy players get back, so say Robert Thomas comes back and isn't traded at the deadline, there's going to be roster spots pushing Finley to maybe the bench or back to waivers. So there is a chance that the Lightning could reclaim Jack Finley before this season's over and then be able to put him into Syracuse. They did it a couple years ago with Gabriel Dumont. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. There was Ottawa claimed him off of waivers. He played a few games for him and then went back on waivers. The Lightning claimed him and put him down into Syracuse. So, something like that could happen again. The role of Curtis Douglas on this team is kind of strange to me. The Lightning have never really carried an enforcer during the kind of John Cooper era. And that's really what Douglas is. Maybe they feel like they do still need that going down the stretch, but I wouldn't be surprised if Douglas goes on waivers as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if he gets claimed. I think there's a general thought that if he goes on waivers, Utah will claim him back. But we'll see what happens kind of as the trade deadline draws a little nearer. Teams make other decisions, and we'll see where it lands the Lightning and how they manage their roster moving forward.
You can understand Brisebois' rationale with Finley in that contract. You have the NHL trade deadline coming up on the 6th. You have the Olympic break. The thought that you could sneak him back to Syracuse is understandable. The other thing is, how many GMs out there were going to be willing to take on an additional contract heading into the trade deadline? There weren't many organizations that would be willing to do that. So I can understand the rationale. St. Louis just happened to be in that situation where they're probably going to be major sellers. They're looking for a rebuild, and they had a chance to add a pretty young, possibly impressive talent to their talent pool in the minors or in the big club.
Yeah. One thing to note is on that contract, this year it is a 2-way contract. So Finley's contract, if he were to go back to the AHL, is only $100,000. Next year, it kicks into a 1-way deal. So a team, if a team tries to put him down in the AHL, they are going to be paying him $775,000. That's a lot for an AHL player to carry on your roster. So like we've been saying, I think Brisebois' philosophy was, hey, if I put this guy on waiver, it's a lot for a team to take. Now, is it an indication that, like you said, St. Louis is going to be a seller and maybe Robert Thomas is on the trading block or some of their other centers that will open up a spot for Finley? It's kind of hard to say. He's a young kid, he's still 23, 24 years old. So he has a chance to maybe with some playing time earn a spot in the NHL. And this could end up being a great move for St. Louis, but time will tell.
Justin, if St. Louis wants to send Finley back down to the minors, do they have to put him through waivers again? Does the same waiver process happen once again for Finley?
Yeah, so he would have to go through waivers. They basically pick up, depending on where St. Louis is, teams below them in the standings, or excuse me, above them in the standings, would have a chance to put a claim in. There's a chance that multiple teams put in a claim for Finley. But if nobody else put a claim in, the Lightning can claim him back. And then at that point, they'd be able to put him into Syracuse. Waivers are always kind of a weird thing to keep an eye on. There is a chance that if they put him on waivers, we'll see if the Lightning do think Finley may still be a part of their future and they claim him back.
Now let's take a quick look at the awards coming up. We'd mentioned in a couple episodes back that John Cooper is going to be one of the favorites for the Jack Adams Award, Coach of the Year.
Yeah, so just before we started recording, I took a quick look at the odds online, and right now Cooper is your betting favorite, plus 150. He's followed up by Lindy Ruff in Buffalo at plus 195, Jared Bednar at plus 450. So right now, his biggest competition, I would really think, is going to be Lindy Ruff in Buffalo. It's a team that hasn't made the playoffs in forever. They're tracking to make it. He's done it without his goaltender going absolutely crazy, which a lot of times you'll see Jack Adams winners have a pretty big correlation to a strong goaltender. The Lightning's recent winning streak has kind of pushed Cooper ahead with the way he's dealt with the injuries. and a little bit of national spotlight with the Stadium Series game. I think you had a lot more press in the last 2 weeks, I would say, talk about John Cooper for Jack Adams than he did for most of the rest of the season. So, yeah, I think right now, if the Lightning keep doing what they're doing and they finish first in either the East or in their division, I think he's got a really good shot. But as long as Buffalo doesn't fall apart completely, Ruff's going to give him a run for his money.
Well, Buffalo right now has a 5-point edge in the wild card. That can be erased pretty quickly. I don't think Ruff is going to get any consideration if Buffalo does not make the playoffs. As long as Tampa stays at the top of the Atlantic, I personally think it's Cooper's to win unless Buffalo qualifies. If Buffalo qualifies, they haven't made the playoffs since 2010. He's going to get a lot of votes just because of that fact.
Yeah, I agree. It's these coaches, Ruff's got a good, track record. He's really done a great job putting this team together, getting them in a winning ways, because they didn't start off the hottest. I mean, they started off pretty bad, so they've had to really repair
They
their.
were at the bottom of the East for a lot of the first couple months of the season.
Yeah, they kind of got hot around the same time the Lightning did. So what he's done up there is great. I don't think really you're seeing too many other people. There could be some Colorado hangover with Jared Bednar. They got off to such a hot start, but again, they haven't had anything to play for in the last, month or so. And you can see teams kind of fade. And if that happens, I think Cooper and Ruff definitely emerge as your two favorites.
The one thing I'm a little curious about with Colorado, and you've mentioned that they've sort of taken the foot off the gas. The Wild and the Stars are 5 and 6 points behind them. If all of a sudden they get caught and passed, Bednar's out. No way he is coach of the year. He's right now one of the top 3 because of the start that they had. But if you're Colorado, you have to win that division because you don't want to play Minnesota or Dallas in the second round, just like last year with Winnipeg. It was important for them to win the division because they didn't want to play Colorado or Dallas, which ended up being an epic 7-game series in that first round.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting division because you figure whoever finishes second and third in that division is going to play each other in the first round. So you're going to have one of the top 3 teams in the West get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. So as you mentioned, whoever's in that division, be it Colorado, Minnesota, or Dallas, they're going to want to win that division just to have a chance to make it in the second round, better chance to make it. I don't know if Dallas and Minnesota catching Colorado moves their coaches up to consideration for coach of the year, but we'll see. There's a lot of hockey still left to be played, so there are still some pretty good storylines out there to be decided, both in the Western Conference and in the East. I mean, the East is still a mess if you look at the top of those standings. So we still have no idea who's going to come out of the Eastern Conference at the top.
It's going to be an interesting 20 to 25 game sprint for all of these teams. Now, real quick, Justin, the Hart Trophy. Nikita Kucherov is one of the top 3 out there. What do the betting lines say?
Yeah, so speaking of Colorado again, Nathan MacKinnon is your favorite right now. Last time I checked, he was at minus 280. Macklin Celebrini, I think we talked about it in a previous podcast when we were talking about the Hart. He's starting to get some love from Vegas. He's second at plus 480. And then you have Nikita Kucherov sitting there at plus 650. Again, I think Kucherov and McKinnon to a certain degree, but not quite so much. They kind of get hurt by some of their teammates that they have. I think Kucherov more than anybody else. Everyone looks at him like, oh yeah, he's doing great, but he also plays with Braden Point. He plays with Andrei Vasilevsky. He's got 3 or 4 probable Hall of Famers on his lineup, and I do think that detracts from some of the public's opinion on him. But they don't get to watch him on a nightly basis to see what he does. I think he's the best winger in this league right now, and he's going to vie for, by the time he's done, he's going to be one of the top 5 Russian players of all time. And you could probably make an argument he's going to probably be a top 15 NHL player overall by the time he's done. It's kind of a shame that he isn't getting quite the love that I would expect from Vegas. But again, he keeps putting up 2 points a game, then it's not going to be a factor.
I think both McKinnon and Kucherov are hurt by the fact that people expect them to do what they're doing. People expect Kucherov and McKinnon to go out there, get 130 points a season, lead their team to division titles. Macklin Celebrini, he was the 2024 first round pick overall. This is all brand new. So this is catching everyone a little bit off guard. And I think that's going to benefit him if San Jose makes the playoffs. Right now, they're on the outside looking in the wild card. If they stay where they're at or fall back even further, I think any talk of him winning the Hart is premature. It's going to become McKinnon or Kucherov. But for right now, it's a pretty interesting story, the fact that Celebrini in his second year is already getting some major consideration.
Yeah, he is kind of the new kid, the new kid on the block here, and there is some pull for that. And let's face it, what he's doing is MVP worthy right now. If he drags this team, if he drags San Jose to the playoffs, he more than deserves consideration for being the Hart Trophy winner. It gets into that conversation of, is the Hart for the best player in the league, the guy who puts up the most points, or is it the person who's most valuable to his team? And I think if all three of these guys make the playoffs, their teams make the playoffs, there's a very strong argument to be made for Celebrini deserving some strong consideration to win the trophy. But again, there's 30 games left to be played in the league. There could be somebody else that we're not even talking about that could pull his team up. What if Columbus goes on a run? Does Zach Werenski start getting some Hart Trophy love? A team like that, if they come out of nowhere over the last 30 games and vault up the playoffs, what's going on in Detroit? Could one of their players, could Mo Sider or somebody like that jump into the race? There's still so much hockey to be played. It's always fun to have these discussions and kind of circle back to them at the end of the season to see, what were you thinking and how could we have thought that when something completely opposite happens?
Well, we talked about taking you on Lightning road trips. A couple episodes back, we decided to look at St. Louis. Last episode, we talked Denver. Now we're going to go north of the border to our friends up in Manitoba. We're going to talk about Winnipeg, a place that Justin and I went to back in 2019. Justin, the first thing that I remember about the arena is how small it is. It holds 13,000 people. It's the smallest arena by far in the NHL.
Yeah, intimate, I think, is how I felt. I thought the energies and the vibes were pretty good. I mean, we went there for an early season game. I think it was maybe the 10th or 11th game of the season. LA was in town, so it's not like it's a huge draw. And I thought the energy in the arena was really cool. Like you said, you do notice how small it is. Unlike some of these arenas where you walk up to it and you feel like, hey, I'm going into a sporting venue. It's almost like you're just walking around downtown and you're like, oh, hey, look, that's where they play hockey at. It's almost just another building. And I want to say we ate in a restaurant that connected through like a skyway to it. So you almost feel like you're kind of, the arena itself almost feels like it's in an office building, which is a weird way to describe a hockey arena. But I thought it was a really cool experience. Anytime you see hockey in Canada, it's fun. But yeah, it was definitely unique in, I would say, the size of the arena.
I was up there in 2024. I was there for a business trip. So I just happened to be in town when Game 5 was going on. They played Colorado. They ended up losing and it ended the series. But I was there for a whiteout up in Winnipeg, and the energy, the fans outside of the building, and actually just the energy in the city. I mean, Winnipeg is a small town. It's no more than about 600,000 people, and that's about it. It doesn't have these huge suburbs like a Tampa does or most U.S. major cities. You basically have a city of Winnipeg and nothing else around it. As Pat Burns once said, you can see your dog run away for 5 miles. It is flat. It's the prairies. But in terms of a hockey setting, it was really cool to be up there for a playoff game. Now, when Justin and I were up there, we just didn't see the game. We decided to take in a little bit of what Winnipeg had to offer. The first place we went was the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame. And for the fans out there who are older, you'll remember the WHA, the Avco Cup, which was the WHA's version of the Stanley Cup, was in the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame.
Yeah, for someone like myself who isn't really versed in hockey history that predates the Lightning, those types of museums are always fascinating to me. I learned so much going into them. It is a small regional sports museum, and you just kind of sit there, you start reading about some of the displays, about some of these players that you've never heard of, unless you're from, Winnipeg or Manitoba. and it's just really fascinating. So I love displays like that. I love museums like that, just kind of off the beaten path a little bit. And for Regional Sports Hall of Fame, it was really well done. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree. They had a lot of exhibits about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers that I find fascinating. I'm a big football fan, but I've also been to a Grey Cup. I'm probably one of few Americans that could say that, but it was really well done. It didn't take us more than probably an hour and 25 minutes, but it was entertaining. It was something that was really cool. The other thing that we did, we also visited the Winnipeg Mint, which is a part of the Royal Canadian Mint. It produces all of the coins for Canada, but one of the other things was we've learned that it produces coins for other countries, which I was completely shocked at. I didn't even think that would happen, but it did. It was something that was, I would say, uniquely Winnipeg.
Yeah, exactly. Again, one of these things that you don't know quite what to expect when you walk in, but hey, you got a few hours to kill, and let's go learn about the process of making money and how it's done and what the markings on each coin represent and how they decide all that stuff. So I love doing stuff like that when we travel. If we go out and just everyone's got an art museum, everyone's got a history museum. So if you get a chance, if you're traveling to see a team and you can kind of sneak into some of these smaller, little off the beaten path kind of museums, it's really fun. And yeah, anytime you can learn about how a coin is made, I say take that advantage.
100%. The one thing I will say about getting to Winnipeg, not the easiest place to get to, especially by car. We drove up there. We actually saw a game in Minnesota. We drove to Duluth afterwards, and then we made the trip all the way across Bemidji over to Fargo, Grand Forks, North Dakota, eventually up Interstate 29 into Manitoba. It is a drive and a half.
Yeah, and like you said, I think once you cross the border, it's pretty much all flatland prairies. So, not exactly the most entertaining drive, but I think it was worth it. I did take a look. I was like, well, I know they've been criticized for not having an airport, which is not true. They do have an airport. It's a small regional airport. But I was like, hey, maybe you could do a Canadian train trip where you start in like Vancouver and take the train over to Winnipeg. You could do that. It is physically possible to do that. I don't know if it's the best use of the 2 days, but you can do it. I've found it very fascinating that the train trip actually routes you up to Edmonton and then down to Winnipeg as opposed to going through Calgary. But hey, that's the Canadian rail system for you. And it does not go on every single day. There's not a trip every day. So if you do want to do that, you will definitely have to plan. Just to let you know, the Lightning do play in Winnipeg on March 5th this year. So they haven't been up there yet. Weather could be a little chilly for you, I would say. I want to say when we went up there, like I said, it was October. It was still a balmy, rainy kind of fall day. But yeah, it's
actually was snowing when we were driving up there.
Yes, it was.
It was flurrying. It was just above the freezing point, but it was the first time I remember seeing snow that year. But the one other thing I would say is, if you're going to make the drive up Interstate 29, which basically goes from Sioux Falls, eastern South Dakota, and eastern North Dakota, there's some really good college hockey up there. University of North Dakota, North Dakota State. If you can somehow tie one of those games in, I have customers over in North Dakota, and they tell me UND and ND State both have great atmospheres.
Yeah, it's definitely something you would take a look at. Those northern teams there, like you said, North Dakota, University of Minnesota, Duluth. Duluth was a fun town. Actually, a fun town. I know you had work when we were there. I kind of wandered around on a blustery 60-mile-an-hour a day, but there were still a lot of fun things to do there. And I can imagine seeing a game there. Some of these smaller college towns where hockey is kind of what you have during the fall. And those kind of buildings can be electric where the whole town's coming in to watch it. So, yeah, that would be a fun trip. I think you could probably knock off, I don't know how many. Well, the Winnipeg has a junior hockey team up there as well, right? They still have one?
Yeah, I believe so. And I believe I believe there's a few over in Manitoba.
So, yeah, you could probably get some college hockey in, some junior hockey in if you wanted to spend a couple weeks up there or a couple of days. So that would be a good way to do it. Doesn't have to always be NHL. I know on a couple of our trips, we've snuck over to some junior hockey games. I want to say we saw Tristan Yari back when he was in junior hockey on one of our trips. So, yeah.
Yeah, he was playing at Edmonton.
Well,
the Oil
no.
Kings.
So yeah, always look for those kind of things to make your trips fun. It doesn't, like I said, doesn't have to be NHL hockey every single time. There's always something you can find.
Now, it wouldn't be a trip recommendation without a random road attraction that I'm going to steer you towards. If you go to the Princess Auto Stadium, many people remember NFL legendary Hall of Famer Bud Grant was the head coach of the Vikings during the Purple People Eater days. Now, they went 0-4 in the Super Bowls, but Bud Grant had a storied NFL career. But before he went to the NFL, he was the coach for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers of the CFL. He won 4 Grey Cups in his 10 years there. There's a statue of Bud Grant outside of the stadium. So, hey, it's another random attraction that you can go to. And, hey, it's one of those things you'll only see it in Winnipeg.
Exactly. Yeah. Much like you see the Paul Bunyan statues in Minnesota, you see a Bud Grant statue outside of a stadium. So, yeah, those are the fun
Paul
stuff.
Bunyan and Babe up in Bemidji. We drove right through there.
Exactly. I believe we have photos. Just road trips, that's kind of the joy of the road trips. You go for a certain reason, and then you find all this other stuff. I will say I can't remember anything spectacular in regards to the food in Winnipeg. I think we stopped at a sports bar, had your regular burgers, so it wasn't exactly overwhelming as far as the food scene. I'm sure some native Winnipeggers will be more than happy to point out where we should have gone to eat, but that's for the next trip, so we'll see what happens.
Well, that is today's episode. If you'd like to reach us, you can reach us by email at backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com. Justin is on Blue Sky. The show is on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, we are there. The show is available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, pretty much any service that is out there, we are now on. We appreciate everyone listening. If you'd like to reach the show and work with us, again, it's backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com. For the managing editor of Raw Charge, he's Justin Godfrey. I am Jason Linkus. Have a great day and go Bolts.
Go Bolts.